I'm going to start this one exactly where I ended the last one. Essentially, pardon me, I had my microphone out of position. Let's think about the fact that the progressive movement started with probably about a dozen people in the late 1860s to early 1870s. And essentially, by the turn of the century, they successfully put in a progressive president, Teddy Roosevelt. And this movement would completely dominate the establishment by the 1930s. And ultimately, it's still what's in play today. So, understanding how progressives did what they did and how they do what they do is instrumental for understanding how you undo it and how you might insert your own meme, so to speak, into the mix. So progressivism would eventually morph into what I've talked about in previous videos, neoliberalism. And really, what neoliberalism is just merely progressivism for the world, with the Americans running things through proxy international organizations. World War II would have a massive impact on independent journalism. It would alter it into corporate journalism. Coming out of World War II, we now had what would become big journalism, which becomes a true partner of the establishment. Rather than it's just being its mouthpiece, it's actually embedded. Now, to revisit an earlier topic, we're going to talk a little bit about the NRA. If you recall previously, I explained how the NRA was essentially a creation of people on the fringe of the establishment in a way of molding the gun culture in a way that was not a danger to the establishment, but something that could be productive to it. So the original NRA, copied off of its English counterpart, was designed to be an organization that would promote gun control and essentially create the mindset that guns were for hunting, sporting, target shooting, and collecting, and don't talk too much about that nasty Second Amendment thing. So by the time 1968 rolls around, the NRA was a perfect establishment adjunct. The NRA propagated its message to the membership, which was that the purpose of a gun in American society was sport shooting, hunting, and collecting. It laundered membership money into congressional campaigns, and mostly these were payoffs to get gun ranges built for gun clubs in particular areas with government money. It essentially, the NRA, wrote the 1968 Gun Control Act. And that was in the wake of the Kennedy's assassinations. Uh, and so this organization was absolutely perfect in terms of how the establishment looked at things. It got paid by the plebes to propagate the establishment message back to the plebes, and then the plebes' money was turned into congressional campaign donations. Now, this organization would change radically with a grassroots takeover that would start in the 70s. This grassroots takeover would eventually change it into the pro Second Amendment organization that mainstream media now despises. It remains establishment adjunct because it still has a great deal of money for political campaigns. It just invests differently than it used to before the takeover. Now, the next part I've talked about at length in previous videos. The divisions we see in society are mirrored in the establishment, and there's been nothing like it in my lifetime. These are times where the factions look for new allies, and in some cases, even recruit the populace. All the messaging coming from the establishment since 2016 screams weakness and fragility. So the timing for radical change in Minecraft may never be this good again. Now, we've gone over a lot of information. We've kind of gone over how did everything get put together. So the question remains, how can the how can the outcome of this Minecraft game be changed? If the whole establishment concept has you confused, or if you're not sure if you buy into the idea, consider the following. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't really actually seem to be running the government. When Trump was president, the military refused to follow orders. For instance, they did not leave Syria when they were ordered. And under Trump, a large portion of the security state actively worked against Trump, essentially using intelligence assets to go after his information and then leaking them out to the establishment media in order to try to undermine him. So, at the very least, if you look at both parties and their ability to run things over the last 8 years, the president's ability to alter course are at best limited. And our current administration would indicate the government can almost run without a president. By the time we get down to the general election, your vote really doesn't matter much, unless perhaps you're in a swing state. Votes are merely thumbs up or thumbs down with no qualifiers. There is no checkbox for the lesser of two evils. There's no comment section on your vote that's saying, well, I voted for you, but here's a whole bunch of things I dislike. No, your vote is a resounding yes or a resounding no and nothing in between. Each vote is all in for what that candidate purports as their goal. For 2024, a vote for the Democrats is a vote for the neoliberal order, as is. A vote for the Republicans is a vote for reorganizing the neoliberal order. A vote for someone like RFK is a vote for old school liberalism, with a rebuke towards progressive excesses. A vote for the Libertarian candidate is a call for smaller government. Voting Green or Socialist, or Democrats who call themselves Democratic Socialists or who organized under the Democratic Socialist organization, is essentially a vote for reordering the economy, where the government controls more but is reorganized away from the old neoliberal order. A vote for Biden, Trump, or RFK will have very modest impact on the next 4 years. Now, legacy media will attempt to convince you that this is the most important election of all history. And I've heard that every 4 years, as long as I have been politically active. So, the question is, if voting doesn't change things, how do you change things? Well, one way is to look for adjunct organizations that might be vulnerable to takeover. If the NRA can be changed from a gun control lobby to a Second Amendment organization, anything's possible. There are countless organizations out there that have the ear of the establishment and have massive budgets, like hundreds of millions of dollars coming into them. Imagine an ACLU that actually cared about the First Amendment, or a Southern Poverty Law Center filing cases against government encroachment on rights. Now, another place to make changes is at your local level in your party politics. You have no choices in the general election because the choices were made before the primaries even ran. You should look favorably on any reforms that make it easier to replace workers in the federal bureaucracy. Lifetime employment does mean stability. However, stability means no change. Work with organizations who are against expanding the vote. Organizations that work to get voters to vote, who are either reluctant to vote or find voting to be too much effort, are not working for change. They're working for things to be exactly the way they are. If you have primaries in your state, work with people and organizations who are looking to go back to caucuses. Bring the decision-making process of who gets to be candidate to people who are more knowledgeable and invested in the process. Create service and political organizations. In the 1850s, one political club was known as the Wide Awakes. They got large enough to actually act as the security organization for the GOP candidates and actually played critical roles in the early days of the US Civil War. So you never know what group you start could turn into something big. The NRA started out as 3 people. Start a social media channel where you educate people counter to what the mainstream media says. Now, if you want to overthrow the government in Minecraft, these are good places to start. So, in the comments below, how many of you were aware of the history of the NRA initially being gun control and then being essentially pro Second Amendment? Are you aware of organizations out there, like the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, that could be something people should be targeting for a takeover? My understanding is like something like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the amount of money they have is just ridiculous. I mean, it could really go right now. Essentially, it's parked in a whole bunch of interest-bearing assets, and it's not really being used terribly much other than to enrich the people who are running it. So taking over an organization like that might at least get you rich. It might actually help you alter the way things work. If you can think of any other organizations that I haven't mentioned, please throw them in the comment section as well. Things that might be a good target for takeover. Private organizations, that is. Please smash the like button. If you have reached this video, the YouTube algorithm brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, please consider subscribing. Look at my other titles. I get into a lot of interesting and different things. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.